Welcome back to Two Ball Two Bold, episode number 20. I am Marshawn Parker,
And I'm Nathan Tomlin.
and what we are doing is we're continuing our top 10 list positions in the NFL going into the 2024 season, 2024-25 season. At this point now, we are at wide receiver. We go down from 10 to number 1. I'm going to start us off, and at number 10, for the list I created, I had DJ Moore for the Chicago Bears. Um, I think Justin Fields has potential, but he wasn't exactly the ideal quarterback. I think Caleb Williams is going to be a top 12, 13 quarterback. In his rookie year, by the end of the rookie year, he might be top 10. Uh, so DJ Moore, this is going to be the first time he's had a this caliber of quarterback in his career. Last year, even with all the uncertainty and the ups and downs of the season, he still managed to get 96 receptions for 1,364 yards and 8 touchdowns. I couldn't believe when I looked at the stats that he was four shy of 100 catches. Um, so I anticipate him having a really big year. I think that offense is going to be real live. Chicago Bear fans are going to have a lot to look forward to as far as excitement. We talked about it in our over and under. I don't think it's going to translate to as many wins right away as people may think. But the next year, I think they'll take another step, and this step will be their year where they prove to be a very young and exciting team. Caleb Williams is going to interject a lot of energy into that team, and DJ Moore is going to be a great beneficiary of that, and Caleb Williams is going to be a great beneficiary of DJ Moore's talents.
Yeah, I mean, I got him on my list too. Um,
Mhm.
I have him a little bit higher. He's only 27, going into his
Mhm.
seventh season. Not real big. He's only 5'11".
No.
Um,
Mhm.
he is coming off a career year, like you said, career high in catches, yards, touchdowns across the board. Um, so his rookie year and then his last year on Carolina were the 2 years he had less than 1,000 yards. Other than that, he actually had over 1,150 yards in the other 4 seasons. So he's been very productive.
Mhm.
This is, you pointed out, best quarterbacks ever played with this year. Um, Also, this is the first time in his career, really, you could say that he's had a legitimate, since he's been a number one receiver, a legitimate number two.
Yeah.
And I mean, Keenan Allen has been a number one most of his career. So, and then Odunze as well as rookie. So DJ Moore's going to get a lot more single coverage this year um, than he's probably seen since his probably second year in the league. Um, his 5 years on Carolina, his averages were 73 catches for 1,040 yards and just 4 touchdowns um, in those 5 years. And then last year on Chicago, he blew up. Right, um, that trade, I mentioned it before, is going to go down as depending on what Bryce Young and Caleb Williams do, but the projections that people are talking about Caleb Williams and then how Bryce Young looked his rookie year, depending on how he can improve, that is going to go down as one of the absolute steals
Yeah.
of a trade ever to trade that pick um, last 2022, 2023's first round
Yeah.
pick
Yeah.
for DJ Moore and essentially Caleb Williams. Man, you get a legit number one in his prime, and then you get the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck. So
Yeah.
what, 12 years? The best quarterback prospect in 12 years. So yeah, I definitely have DJ Moore on there. I've always liked DJ Moore. Um, his I don't know if his receptions necessarily will be as high because they're going to spread the ball around, but at the same
Mhm.
time, it's like, man, he's going to get more one-on-one coverage, so he is going to be open more potentially. So it'll be interesting, but he's been extremely consistent with his yards per reception at 14. If you look at his career, he had one outlier year, his third year in the league, he averaged like 18 yards a catch. Other than that, pretty much 14 yards every
Yeah.
single year per catch. So very, very consistent. But I really like DJ Moore. Um, but my number 10, and man, I was like back and forth with my nines and tens. Man, I'll be honest with you. I was like, man, there's so many good receivers. But I went with a guy who, if he plays, Brandon Ayuk, actually, as number 10. Um, he's increased his yards, his receptions, his catch rate every single season. Back to back 1,000-yard seasons. He's the legitimate number one wide receiver on that team, number one passing target on the 49ers, one of the best offenses in the league. Almost 18 yards per catch last year.
Mm-hmm.
He's in right now, he's in a great system. So if he's on the 49ers, I really like him as a top 10 receiver because, again, in that system, you put a good players in a good system and they're even better, right? And so if he gets traded, depending on where he gets traded to, that could make a difference in terms of if he really stays on this list or not. I hope he gets his money. Whether it doesn't look like it's going to be with the 49ers, in all honesty, unless something drastic happens. But if he plays, and I think he's going to end up playing. I think he's ended up playing for the 49ers. I don't think he's going to sit out completely. And then he's going to get franchised next year, and they'll probably trade him. I think that's what's more likely going to happen. But I think he's going to play this year. He was second team All-Pro last year. And again, he's a big play guy. Him and Debo are perfect complements to each other. I think Debo is a better football player, but Ayuk is a better receiver. And then also the health. Ayuk hasn't had any injury issues. So I did go with Brent Ayuk as my number 10.
Well, spoiler alert, there is not a single Niner on my top 10 wide receiver list.
Might be the only position that's the case, at least on offense.
Yeah. And I mean, now if it was a top 15, they would probably both be on it. But yeah, top 10, no. So number 9 for me, there's three certainties in life: death, taxes, and Mike Evans getting 1,000 yards. So Mike Evans is number 9 on my list, and I believe he's going to tie Jerry Rice with 11 straight 1,000-yard seasons. He has been, incredibly consistent with great QB play, subpar QB play, average QB play. He's a huge target. I was a little surprised that he's only made 5 Pro Bowls, but I mean, it does make sense because, as we talked about before we started this is, there's so many receivers. There's so many good receivers, and there's been so many good receivers over the last 10 years that, you could have, 10 straight 1,000-yard seasons, but only make the Pro Bowl half of those times. I expect him to have a big year. I do probably have a lot more confidence in Baker Mayfield than maybe the average person does. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he's great, but I think he's a good quarterback. I think the Bucs are going to have a good season. I think Mike Evans is going to be a big reason why. I can see him going, like I said, over 1,000 yards. I can see him having double-digit touchdowns again. Not a huge catch guy. I don't think he's ever went over 100 catches, but he's incredibly consistent. Great jump ball wide receiver. Like I said before, a big target. And if you ever want to see a good battle, watch the battles between him and Marcus Lattimore. Those are some good ones. And they play twice a year. But Mike Evans is number 9 on my list.
Yeah, so Mike Evans was one of those guys that, like I said, there was probably about 6 guys that I went through between 9 and 10.
Yeah.
I didn't have him on my list. And it's actually to the point that you kind of made. He's made 5 Pro Bowls despite having 1,000 yards. He is extremely consistent.
Yeah.
But have you ever said Mike Evans is top 5 wide receiver in the NFL?
No, that's why he's
No.
not in the five.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, so to me, it's he's a very good player,
Hmm.
and he's extremely consistent. He's never played less than 13 games, right? And he's played 15 games or more in all but two seasons. I'm sorry, in all but one season,
Hmm.
which was 2019. He barely got to 1,000 yards the first year with Tom Brady, 1,006 yards to be exact.
Yeah, yeah,
But to give you an idea of how many yards per game now, and then he played 16 games that year to get to 1,000 yards. In a 16-game season, that's only 63 yards a game.
yeah.
Now, I know that,
Godwin was good that year.
that's good. That's good. Yeah, yeah. But to me, it's 1,000 yards now. Now it's 17 games. The way the game is opened up, it's not as impressive. What's impressive is the fact he's done it every year.
Yeah.
Um, but if you look at his touchdowns, for instance, so the first two of his first 3 years in the league, he had 12 touchdowns.
Hmm.
The last 4 years, he's had 13, 14, 6, and then 13, right? So his touchdowns have significantly increased 3 of the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Um, he's never, to your point, never had 100 catches. 96 was his career high. He's pretty much in the 70 catch range, 70
Yeah.
to 80 catches. He's had 1 year at 96, one at 86, and one at 68. Everything else is in the 70s.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's he's had 1 year with 1,001 yards, 1 year with 1,006. Right. He's had only 3 seasons out of those 10 over 1,250 yards. One was 1524. He made a second team All Pro that year, 1321. And then last year, 1255 was actually the third highest he ever had.
Hmm.
So most of his seasons are, he gets between 63 and 75 yards per game. That to me is not top 10. And that's why I don't put him on here. Again, very good player. He's probably, if he doesn't get hurt, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame because he's already at almost 12,000 yards and 94
Hmm.
touchdowns. And he's going to end up, think about this. I mean, even if he does 800 yards conservatively for the next 3 years, he's only 31, I think, this year. So
I
if he
believe
does
so.
800 yards for the next 3 years,
Yeah.
that puts him at like 14,000 receiving yards. He'll get
Yeah.
6 more touchdowns to put him over 100. I mean, that's a Hall of
Yeah.
Fame, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though, again, never the best. He's made 2 second team All Pros, only 5 Pro Bowls.
Hmm.
Maybe we'll make another 1 or 2 Pro Bowls in his career, but good player. Just don't have him on my list. My number 9, I went. This is the one that you probably, most people will probably be like, after last year, how do you make it? It's actually the last 2 years. It's Cooper Kupp, and I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And he's had 2 injury seasons, but the last full season that he played was absolutely historic, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it was one of the greatest single seasons for a receiver ever. He came 20 yards shy of breaking Calvin Johnson's record for yards in a season, which is nuts because he played an extra game and he still
Yeah.
came up short. And when you think of that season, you're like, man, that guy, he went bananas and still didn't do it. But he had the triple crown for wide receivers, right, that year. But even you look at the last 2 years, so he played 9 games in 2022. He had 75 catches for 812 yards and 6 touchdowns. That's barely over half the season. He missed
Hmm.
8 games. So if you slightly less than double that, you're looking at 130 catches. You're looking at 1,500 yards, 10, 11 touchdowns. And then last year, 12 games, which some of them, again, he was hurt. He had 59 catches for 737 yards and 5 touchdowns. So definitely shrunk a lot back to his pre-breakout year in 2021, although working back from the injury and Puka had established himself. I expect him to be more like he was in 21 and 22 if he's healthy. And again, I'm giving him this spot because of what he's capable of. We'll
Hmm.
see. It's very possible that he is on the significant downside. He's 31
Yeah.
and he's had 2 injuries now, but he was hurt the beginning of last year, not the end. So that's why I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. He's bigger than you think. He's 6'2", right?
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know why. Like you think how he plays, he doesn't play like a big receiver. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? He plays more shifty. which to me is just kind of interesting. But he's deceptively athletic, and he just gets open. He finds the open spot, and he's a perfect Matt Stafford receiver, right? Matt Stafford either likes to chuck it down the field or find guys, that are fearless over the middle. And Matt Stafford can, he can put the ball in places a lot of quarterbacks can't. So I did have Cooper Kupp as my number 9.
And I mean, I get that. You hit with the sneaky athletic. What are you gonna say next? He's a gym rat, and he's got a passion for the game. Why is it only certain athletes get those little taglines?
Because look, if you saw Cooper Kupp on the street, and it has nothing to do with the fact he's white, man. Cooper Kupp looks like a goober, dude. He looks like a straight goober. Like Christian McCaffrey looks like an athlete, right? He's a white
He
guy.
better. He's a McCaffrey.
Well, Ed McCaffrey looks like a goober, dude. Come on, the guy's tall and thin,
Man.
but he
That dude's
was
6'5" and
tough
jacked.
as nails. But he was tough as nails. But Cooper Kupp, he doesn't look like, oh man, that guy's the best receiver in the NFL, right? He doesn't look like that guy had a year that was the best receiver in the NFL. He just doesn't come off that way. And then also how he acts, he doesn't act like a lot of these top receivers that are rah and look at me and just kind of more of a quiet, like go about his business type of receiver. Like some of the guys that may be on this list or may not be, but kind of like a Mike Evans. Mike Evans the same way, right? Mike Evans is real flashy. He's just a good player, goes about his business. You don't really hear about him other than football stuff, which is a positive. So
So I mean, I considered him because there was a few guys that I considered, and I couldn't because I mean I just ultimately think now he's the number 2, and then and when you look at it, you never want to take away from anybody's production based off of someone else's production. But this being a Broncos fan, like when, Clinton Portis got off, and Clinton Portis was an excellent running back. Then you see Mike Anderson get off. Then you see like Alandis Gary get off. And you're like, wait a minute. Are they just really good at picking running backs, or is it the system?
Well, Portis was a little bit different than those other guys.
No, Portis. No,
because he was a good running back.
I just said Portis was different, but Puka's year did it again. You win a triple crown, but you see Puka's production. Say that fast 3 times, and it does kind of make you at least kind of side eye a little bit. And then when you look at Matt Stafford's history with his number 1 wide receiver, he's going to make sure his number 1 wide receiver eats. I mean, Calvin Johnson was going to eat if I was throwing him the ball.
Calvin Johnson eat with anybody at quarterback. Come on.
Yeah. But like Golden Tate, when he was the Lions' number 1 wide receiver, it's no accident that Cooper Kupp's production went up high as soon as they get Stafford. So I think at this point with his age and with the injuries, I think he's destined to be the number 2. And I think Puka's the new it girl, the new it girl in town, right? But I mean I get it. Trust me, I've seen him tear my Niners up. So number 8 for me is a guy who was able to have 95 catches for 1,042 yards with Zach Wilson as his quarterback last year. No offense, Zach Wilson. I'm sure you're a good man, and
not every game.
You got
Mike White,
a live
didn't he?
arm. No, Mike White.
Mike White. Yeah, too many Wilsons over there, man.
Yeah, I know, right? So Garrett Wilson was probably the best receiver of that at the time of that Ohio State bunch. Now, obviously, later I think Marvin Harrison has a chance to be the greatest Ohio State wide receiver since Chris Carter. But of that bunch in the time, Garrett Wilson was the alpha. And and with Aaron Rodgers coming back, if Aaron Rodgers can stay healthy the whole year, Garrett Wilson is probably going to be higher on this list. But I felt comfortable putting him at number 8. He's had over 1,000 yards his first 2 seasons with subpar quarterbacking. And Aaron Rodgers, even a half a season of Aaron Rodgers, is going to be better than any quarterback season production he's had in his career since college when he had C.J. Stroud, obviously, and I believe Justin Fields. But I mean, there's nothing really else to say because this is year 3 for him.
Mhm.
But I think he fits at number 8.
Yeah, so he was one of the guys that I think, just missed the cut for me. To be honest, I mean, I told you,
Oh,
man. Yeah, my 9 to 15,
yeah,
I probably was like, man, which ones do I want to talk about and which ones do I think should be on here? Because to your point, like you said earlier, wide receiver is so deep, man, and it
yeah,
comes to a personal preference. The reason I left him off is Aaron Rodgers is a little bit of an unknown with the Jets offense and how they're going to play. I think they're going to be a very run heavy offense, especially early in the season. I really do, and I think it would be more beneficial for the Jets to play that way. I don't think they need to change their offensive system. They just now have a quarterback who can make throws. I
hmm
don't think they need to change the offensive system to throw the ball more. Garrett Wilson has 315 targets in 34 games.
yeah,
Um, and in 29 starts. So if you look at the games he started, so he's getting close to 10 targets a game. I don't think he's getting more than that, right? And out of those, he's catching over. He's catching about what is it? About 60% of them
yeah,
or so, between 50 and 60%. Only 11 yards per catch last year. I think his touchdowns will increase.
big time.
Um, they're going to be more willing to throw the ball, of course, in the red zone with a quarterback that is not incompetent. Um, but I don't think his receptions are going to jump that much. I don't think his yards are going to jump that much. I'm just hesitant because I got to see how their offense looks with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers hasn't thrown a football in 2 years. And not Aaron Rodgers, he's 40, but he's 41. He's coming out.
Yeah,
An Achilles injury is serious. He hasn't been hit. He even mentioned it when they talked about he's probably not going to play in the last preseason game. And they
no,
mentioned it.
for what?
He's like, I haven't been hit. So that's the one thing. How's Aaron Rodgers going to be when he gets hit?
Yeah,
He hasn't been hit since then. Over a year removed from being hit, and then before that,
hmm
it was 9 or months or whatever because
yeah.
you're not getting hit in the off season.
Let me ask you a
How
question.
how is it? Yeah, yeah.
So let's just say Aaron Rodgers misses games, and we talked
Mhm.
about this when we talked about the Jets.
Yeah, Tyrod Taylor's a good quarterback. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I think he can have more production under Tyrod Taylor than he does
yeah.
under Zach Wilson.
I agree. I
Mhm.
just
I get it.
to me there was a lot of guys,
There's a lot of
and
guys.
I just don't think I got to see him in this offense with a competent quarterback first, and then kind of
I
go
get
from
it.
there. Because if you look at his, and again, it's hard to judge him because of the quarterback play he's had. And looking at just
hmm
numbers, like I talked about, man, that 1,042 yards last year, it's only 61 yards a game. I mean,
Yeah.
that's nothing, rah rah to
Zach
me.
Wilson was throwing for
Again,
like probably 160 though.
no, I mean I get it. And the other 40 was the bright Brees Hall. No, I understand that,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah,
but
yeah,
that's what I'm saying is I got to see how their offense is going to look because I don't think they're going to throw the ball a lot. I do, especially early. I mean, we talked about the first game
yeah,
against the 49ers. I'd be surprised if Aaron Rodgers throws more than 20 passes. And how many passes are going to be more than 10 yards down the field in that first game? Especially, especially if they fall behind. They're not going to let them
yeah.
drop back with that defense just to pin their ears back and come after Aaron Rodgers. You know what I mean? Um, so my number 8 was DJ Moore, who we already discussed. So
Yeah.
I had DJ Moore at number 8. So go ahead. I feel like from here on out we're gonna have the same 7 guys, just maybe in a little different order. But go ahead and hit me with
I
your
tend
number
to agree
7.
with that. Now, from a production standpoint, I think that most people would say, "Hey, why isn't he higher on your list?" But again, there's so many. I mean, the NFL is loaded with wide receivers. So for me, number 7 was was Amon-Ra St. Brown. Uh, he had over 100 yards the last 2 seasons. I remember watching him, back in high school. He played for Mater Dei, and watching him in USC games. And I always thought he was a really good wide receiver. I didn't understand why he was picked number 112. I think he was. I think there was like
Fourth
five or
round, yeah.
six. There was like 5 or 6 receivers drafted before him. I
Because
didn't understand that.
USC was in that weird time where
Yeah,
they weren't good because they weren't good. They lost all
but
those.
he jumped out. He even in those seasons, he jumped out of the
Mhm.
screen. It was
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah.
he this guy is. So the only thing I could think of is, I mean, because he's not a big guy, is
He didn't
that
run. I
people
don't think he ran the fastest 40 for
he
a
did
guy his
he
size
didn't
either. So
he didn't
yeah,
do
I
that.
think
So
he
it
ran in the
had to
four
be
six range, if I recall,
those two things probably combined to kind of scare people
or
off.
four
But
five.
over 100 catches last 2 years. Had I mean shit, I mean 119 catches on
I
163
think
targets. That's
I
really
think he
good.
got I think he got hurt his one of the years in college too, so that could have had something to do with it too.
Yeah, I think he did his senior year. I think he did.
He only played
And
3 years in college, so I think it was
was he
his
did he
last
come
year,
out
his
as a
junior year.
junior?
Yeah.
Okay, was he a red shirt?
Mm-mm,
I don't
I
know.
don't think
Okay,
so.
okay, okay. But he had over 1,500 yards, 10 touchdowns. That Lions offense is going to be really scary because I think Jameer Gibbs is
Mhm.
going to take a step up. I think you have year three with Jared Goff in the same system. I think I can never say it. Is it Jameis Williams?
Jameson, like the
Jamison
whiskey,
Williams. There
just
we
spelled
go.
different.
Jamison Williams. I think he's going to have a more productive year, and with his speed, that's going to open up things over the top. Uh, or rather, him taking it over the top is going to kind of open up that the middle of the field. So I don't think that he'll have the same statistical year as he had this year, but I think that Lions offense in total is going to be scarier than they were last year. As we talked about, I think that the number one seed is going to be the race between Philly, Detroit, and San Francisco. And, unfortunately, I think it's more realistic with all the turmoil going on with contracts and things with San Francisco. I think it's more likely that it'll be Detroit or Philadelphia as the number one seed. Um, so that's I have him there as
Yeah,
second.
I mean he's on my list. I have
Yeah.
him a little bit higher.
Okay.
Um, Look, the only thing that kept him from 100 catches and 1,000 yards his rookie year is they didn't really give him opportunities till the back half.
Yeah.
Um, he still finished with 90 catches and 912 yards, by the way. But look, every year, 3 years in a row, 90 catches to 106 to 119. He's seen
Hmm.
his yards go from 912 to 1161 to 1515. His touchdowns from 5.6 to 10. His yards per catch from 10.1 to 11 to 12.7. His catch percent has been extremely consistent, right around 73%, which a lot of that's a quarterback too, putting the ball where it needs to go. I'm not going to sit here and
Yeah.
that's all him, but 2 straight Pro Bowls last year, first team All Pro. And he played with some kind of rib. Would he break his rib or had some kind of rib injury or something last year?
Yeah.
It
Oh,
came out in the
you
Netflix.
watched the receipt? Yeah, yeah, the Netflix receiver.
So when you hear about that and look at what he did, and you're like, wait, what? So he's getting better every year, um, more efficient every year. Um, I love this guy's receiver, man.
Yeah.
And the offense that they have is very dynamic. You mentioned a couple players, but let's talk about a couple more that make it even better. Is David Montgomery, who's a perfect complement
Hmm.
to Jameer Gibbs, and Sam Laporta, who may or may not
Yes.
show up on the top 10 tight ends,
Oh, he will.
who takes the middle of the field. Those
Yeah.
Iowa tight ends, man, they breed them. That's that corn they eat there or something.
Something.
But but look, I mean, he gets open. He's a great route runner. And watch the Lions. He is open. and
Yes.
the defense keys on him.
Yes.
How does he get so open? He is very shifty. I mean, he just finds top. You cover him, man. He's getting open. He just knows how to get free and find the open spot. Jared Goff is extremely accurate. If he gets time, and I think the Lions may have the best offensive line unit in the league. If it's not the best, it is top three.
Hmm.
Yes, his numbers may slightly decrease a little bit, but he gets about 10 targets a game. So if he's catching 70% of those, well, 7 catches a game for 17 games, right? You're talking about 100 and what is that, 105 catches. So
Hmm.
that's not that much of a decrease in production. Um, yeah, man, I do have him higher, but he is definitely on my list. So my number 7 is the eldest statesman of my list. Well, I'd have to look at the exact birthdays if he's older than Cup or not, but I think he is. 3 straight first team All Pros before last year, 6 straight Pro Bowls until last year. And last year, he still had 103 catches for 1,144 yards and 8 touchdowns. He has 10,781 yards and 95 touchdowns for his career. Last year was his fewest yards per game since 2017. Davante Adams.
Hmm.
I mean, Davante Adams is still an elite wide receiver. Look, he played with Jimmy Garoppolo, who is a below average starting quarterback in the NFL. I think we can agree. And Aiden O'Connell, who I believe is a backup quarterback in the NFL,
Yes. I agree.
at best. And
Yes.
and I wish him well. The Raiders already said that Minshew is going to be the quarterback. Watch
Hmm.
Adams this year.
Yeah.
Adams will have a better year
Yeah.
when he's played with Aaron Rodgers, who of course is one of the greatest quarterbacks, especially talent wise. Absolutely one of the best quarterbacks that's ever played. He put up crazy numbers. Even the 1 year with Derek Carr, he put up great numbers. And I think we could agree Derek Carr is a top 32 quarterback in the NFL. He's a starting quarterback. He's
Hmm.
somewhere in the low to mid 20s, right? I mean, there's some starting quarterbacks that are probably behind him. And he still put up good numbers. 6 of the last 8 seasons, he's had 10 or more touchdowns. He had just 8 last year, and in 2019, he had 5 in 12 games. He missed 4 games. He's had 4 straight in 5 of 6 seasons with 100 receptions. The other one was 2019 when he played in only 12 games. So he is a model of consistency, but this is where that model of consistency between Davante Adams and Mike Evans is different.
Yeah.
Davante Adams, his numbers, he gets 400 more yards. He gets
Hmm.
20, 30 more catches. He gets touchdowns are pretty similar. But the other numbers are all better. And let's be real, if you ask a corner who they'd rather cover or who's a tougher cover, I guess I should say, they would say it's Davante Adams. So I have
Oh yeah.
Davante Adams from the Las Vegas Raiders at number 7.
Hmm. And he was my number 6.
Not perfect.
And it's funny. It's funny because even when I looked at it and I looked at the production from last year, he's had 95 touchdowns in his first 10 years, which is fifth all time in the first 10 years of a career. I look at him and I say, and see, this is what makes these lists so interesting because the only thing keeping him really away from being in our top 3 is the team he's on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny because we're really kind of ranking these guys, but we're really ranking the guy along with their situation. Because Devontae
Mm-hmm.
Adams is probably God, maybe third or fourth best receiver in the league. But
Mm-hmm.
you had him at 7, I have him at 6. So with that being said, we can move along. You can go ahead and tell us who your 6 is.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, yeah, that guy, he's nuts, man. He's had
Yeah.
1,300 yards 4 times, and they're 4 of 5 years prior to last year. So he is. I agree. He talent levels there. I do think the Raiders trade him. To be honest, if they fall out of a contention quickly, if they have a
I
bad
thought
start
about
to the
that
year,
too.
I
Yeah.
think they do end up trading him to a team that feels like they're a receiver away. But my number 6 is probably a guy that I think you probably then have at number 5 since you haven't mentioned him yet.
Yeah.
And that is going to be A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
It, you called him Little T.O. or whatever, whatever you called him. You know his nickname is called Swole Batman. Don't know why,
That,
but that's a cool nickname.
yeah.
But it still blows my mind that Ole Miss had him and
Oh
DK
man,
Metcalf as your wide
DK
receivers.
Metcalf.
Like,
That's
could you
crazy.
imagine being a corner that time of your career, in the SEC, and you have two grown men like that at wide receiver, and you got to cover them?
Tight end playing wide
Anyway,
receiver.
look, yeah, the guy should be playing friggin' middle linebacker or defensive end. Um, 4 or 5 years to start career with over 1,000 yards. Um, the 1 year he didn't, he played 13 games on Tennessee. He had 869 yards. He's a big play guy. His 2 years on Philadelphia are unreal, right?
Yeah.
And again, quarterback play situation. We talked about it, man. Ryan Tannehill was at his best in those years, right?
Hmm.
That was the best years of the career for him. He had a good little run there. Jalen Hurts is better. The Eagles'
Yeah.
offense is better. Devontae
Yeah.
Smith is a better wide receiver than anyone the Titans had as their number 2 with A.J. Brown there. The only thing Tennessee had that was better was Derrick Henry,
Hmm.
right? I
Hmm.
mean, they had a better running game, which of course means less opportunities for A.J. Brown as well in the passing game because they ran the ball so much. But 2 seasons on the Eagles, 2 second-team All-Pros, 2 Pro Bowls. He had 88 catches for 1,496 yards and 11 touchdowns. He follows that up with 106 catches for 1,456 and 7 touchdowns. His 3 seasons in Tennessee still made a Pro Bowl. He had 2,000-yard seasons. He had 8, 11, and then 5 in terms of touchdowns. His average in those 3 seasons was 62 catches for 998 yards and 8 touchdowns. Um, and again, he is physically intimidating. He is
Yes.
one of the more physically intimidating wide receivers in the league. And again, you have Devontae Smith on the other side, who what's holding Devontae Smith probably from being on this list is the fact that he's the number 2 on his own team. Otherwise, he would probably talent-wise has an argument to be on this list, but I had to go with A.J. Brown as my number 6.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess I could he's in my number 5. So he's my number 5. In the last 2 years, he has 33 receptions of 25 yards or more. So, I mean, we're talking about big plays here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he's a tone setter. He's a good. Most of these guys are also, and we just haven't mentioned it, but all these guys, another added benefit is all these guys that are on the list are all good blockers as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they all get down and dirty, so it's like they help in the running game as well. Um, but I could see him. I could see him having even more production this year, especially from maybe the receiving yards go down, but I could see him having double the amount in touchdowns. He had 7 touchdowns last year. He had over 1,400 yards. I could see a season where he has 1,200 yards, but has
Mm-hmm.
12, 13 touchdowns, because I think that Eagles offense is going to be way more productive. I think Saquon Barkley is going to be amazing. I think Jalen Hurts is going to have a bounce back year and is going to have, probably half the amount of turnovers that he had last year. And I don't, in looking at it, I just don't know how much they really want to continue to do the tush push, especially when you have to replace, Jason Kelsey at center. And that may open up not just opportunities for Saquon Barkley to get goal line touchdowns, but that also opens up the opportunity for your big wide receiver to catch some goal line touchdowns as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's my number 5. So who do you have
Yeah.
at 5?
So my number 5 is Amon Ra. So
Okay,
which we
okay,
already talked about. So
all right, yes.
we'll go to your number 4, who I'm pretty positive I know who your number 4 is. So hit
I
it up.
think I think we both have
I
the
think we're
same. I
the
think
same from here on out, man.
yeah. So number 4 for me is, as long as he doesn't sit out, as long as he plays, is CD Lamb.
Mm-hmm.
CD Lamb was a absolute. So listen to this. He had 181 targets, and he caught 135 of those balls. That is a crazy high reception percentage.
Yeah, it's like
For that, I mean,
75%.
that is. It doesn't get much better than that. He had 12 touchdowns. He had 1,700 yards. I don't. I don't. I was going to. You know what? I was going to say I don't see him matching that production, but actually, I could see him matching that production if he plays, because
Mm-hmm.
because to me the running game is going to be worse than it was last year.
Yes,
You know, and I don't. I mean, who's their number two receiver now?
Brandon Cooks still.
Okay, so same as last year, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and at
They
this
really
point,
didn't add anything, add or
no,
subtract,
no.
except the running backs, yeah, and the
So
offensive line.
But Brandon Cooks at this point is about what, 30, 31?
Yeah, at least, but he's had a lot of injuries lately too.
I was just going to say he's had a ton of concussions,
Mm-hmm.
and he's had a ton of injuries. I mean, he's been highly productive in his career. You know, he's lived up to his first round status, but you know that that offense is going to be CD Lamb or bust. It's just going to be that simple. So, I mean, man, they better pay that man because he might actually end up with 18, 1900 yards. And now he's like, man, I wanted 30, 32 before. Now I want 35. So they might need to pay that man right now before the
Mm-hmm.
price of the brick continues to go up. But yeah, that's who I have as my number four.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Look, he's getting. I think he'll play this year because it's on the 5th-year option. I think he's going to
Yeah.
play because if he sits, that
They're going
hurts
to.
him
Mm-hmm.
because he has to play by. I think it's week 8, or it doesn't count as a year, and
Correct.
then and then that throws off everything. So he's going to have to play.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of if he's going to play the full year or the back half, and then they're going to franchise him if they don't come to an agreement, and they're going to work on signing him. A franchise tag for a wide receiver at this point would be over 30 million anyway, so they might as well
Mm-hmm.
sign him. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know if he wants to be in Dallas because do you think they're going to pay him and Dak? I don't. And what's Dak worth if CD leaves? Now I get it; a wide receiver is easier to draft than a
Mm-hmm.
quarterback. Um, but it's an interesting conundrum for Dallas because they have to figure out, do we pay both these guys and pretty much cash strap ourselves for the foreseeable future and hope that these two guys are good enough and just we can draft well enough to build a team to win or not. But look, CeeDee Lamb, 3 straight Pro Bowls. He was second team All Pro in 22, first team All Pro last year, of course. Every single year, he's increased his reception 74 to 79 to 107 to 135, which led the league last year. Every single year, he's increased his yards 935 to 1102 to 1359 to 1749. Every single year, he's increased his touchdowns from 5 to 6 to 9 to 12. He has averaged between 12.6 yards per catch to 13.9 yards per catch. And that career average is 13, so right in the middle there. He plays with a good quarterback. He is the undoubted number one on that team. He has the talent to be number one. As much as I just really think McCarthy's not the right coach, he does, if he's the one calling the offensive plays, they do a good job moving CD around and putting him in the slot sometimes,
They
putting him
do.
outside, and getting him in different situations because let's be real, they got to get him the ball. And now you went from Pollard, who was a good receiving back, to Zeke, who's not, especially at this point. It will be interesting, but with CD is elite at everything. I mean, you could throw the ball deep to him and do a jump ball. You could throw the ball shallow and have him get yards after the catch. He can catch over the middle, make tough catches. He gets open. But yeah, he's the number 4. Only 25, man, 25 years old.
Yeah.
Absolute stud. And what's crazy is, right, he was the 3rd wide receiver I think drafted that year. Right, you had
Yep.
Ruggs, Judy, and then CeeDee Lamb. The Raiders did the Al Davis and went for speed. The
Yeah,
Broncos actually their reasoning for drafting Judy made sense, and I thought Judy was going to be better than what he was. Let's be
I
real.
did.
But
I thought he was gonna be so good.
They drafted Judy because Cortland Sutton had that huge year,
Yeah.
and was the outside guy. They wanted a guy that was more in the slot and more in
Hmm.
the middle of the field. And Jerry Judy in college was more that guy than CeeDee Lamb was in college. Um, they were wrong, right? And so
Yeah.
CeeDee Lamb ends up on the Cowboys, and obviously they got the better receiver. Um, but anyway, he's my number 4. So
Yeah.
your number 3, who is
Oh,
also might be sitting out, I think too, right?
yeah. Yeah. This is gonna be interesting. Jamar Chase is, I mean, the biggest compliment I can make towards him is the argument that I've had about the Bengals team is that the organization didn't get any better. They just happened to draft two blue chippers, Joe Burrow, and then the very next year they got Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase had 100 receptions in a year in which Joe Burrow was, when he did play, was
10
injury
games.
riddled.
Yeah.
But I mean, half those games he wasn't himself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I think it's Jake Browning. Jake Brown is Browning or Browner.
Browning.
Browning, yeah. I just remember him from the University of Washington. He led
Mm-hmm.
the Huskies to the playoffs as a kind of an undersized quarterback. Um, but Jamar Chase is literally he's one of those guys to me. He's I don't think I don't think too highly of stats in general. We've had these conversations over and over, but Jamar Chase is not a stats guy. He is just, you watch him play and he's always open. He's he's that the Super Bowl, and we have talked about how great we think Aaron Donald is, and that he deserves to be on the Mount Rushmore defensive players. And somebody right now is saying, how the heck did he find a way to go from wide receiver to Aaron Donald? But if Aaron Donald does not pressure Burrow on that last play of that Super Bowl, the Bengals are winning the Super Bowl because Chase turned, I think it was Jalen Ramsey, into toast on that play. And Burrow just couldn't gather himself to make that throw because this big burly man who we consider to be the greatest D tackle ever was right in his face before he could do it. Jamar Chase is, I wouldn't be surprised if a year or two from now he's number one on this list. He's that good. He's amazing. It's a matter of can Burrow stay healthy? If he can
Mm-hmm.
stay healthy, even if they lose, matter of fact, especially if they lose T Higgins, because if they lose T Higgins, I think Chase production, believe it or not, is going to go up.
Well, more
Uh,
targets. Yeah.
More targets. I think we'll see that Jamar Chase can do a lot more than maybe they've asked him to do right now. Uh, but I don't think there's really much more. I feel like almost every episode I've talked about, you know, in some capacity, what I feel about Chase is talent, and I and
Mm-hmm.
I, I think he's so good that again, is it anybody who performs well on specific organizations. There's probably about 5 organizations in the NFL, and the Bengals happen to be one of them. That if they go there, they get drafted, and they perform well, I have even more respect for them and more appreciation for their talents because they were not set up for success because they did not go to an organization that sets their players up for success.
Yeah, Jamar Chase, my number 3 too. So he had some injuries his second year in the league. So it's
Yeah,
interesting. His receptions have gone up,
yeah,
81 to 87 to 100. He would have had 100 catches in 2022.
yeah,
So his 2 seasons with Burrow were definitely his best. He had 81 for 1455, 13 touchdowns. It was a second team All Pro as a rookie. His next year, he missed 5 games. He still had 87 for 1046 and 9 touchdowns and made the Pro Bowl for the second straight year. Um, and that season, the Bengals, Joe Burrow was healthy. So again, another huge year. He would have had over 100 catches, would have had probably close to 1,500 yards, and would have had a few more touchdowns. And then last year with no Joe Burrow, 100 catches, 1,216 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Touchdowns obviously shrank. Yards per catch shrank. Yards per game shrank. So, yes, Joe Burrow is with all these guys, right? Their quarterbacks are key to them being successful. The wide receiver is, for a skill position, one of the most dependent positions, right? And you could argue running back needs an offensive line, all that stuff too, sure. But there's multiple guys on the offensive line. The
Yeah.
49ers can, if their right tackle's hurt, they can always run left and run behind big Trent Williams, right? So you have options as a running back to still find ways to make plays, even if the offensive line isn't great. If your quarterback's terrible or you're playing with a backup quarterback, as a receiver, it's difficult because they're not going to hit you on those tough passes. They'll hit you when
No.
you're open. They're still NFL quarterbacks.
Yeah.
But they're not going to hit you on those tough patches. And Joe Burrow puts the ball in as perfect a spot as any quarterback in the league when he's healthy. He dropped some dimes, right? So, yeah, but I mean, Jamar Chase got 4.3 speed and had like a
Yeah.
40-inch vertical. I mean, the guy
Yeah.
is physically, and he's 6 foot, about 200
Mhm.
pounds, so he's not slim. He's not super bulky either.
No.
He's a perfect athletic specimen for wide receiver, like good height, not too big, not too thin, not too short, great speed, good jumping abilities. And like you said, he's just a guy that just finds ways to get open. So
Hmm.
we'll go to number 2.
If
Oh,
this list was the the best playmaker in NFL or the scariest offensive player in NFL, I actually feel the scariest offensive player, he'd still be number 2. If he was the scariest offensive player, not quarterback, he would be number 1. But it's not. It's wide receiver. So he's number 2, and it's Tyreek Hill. He's had over 1,700 yards the last 2 years with the Dolphins. So he was able to get his ring with the Chiefs. Then he was able to get his money with Miami and build up his stats. I think rings overall really matters if you're a quarterback, but if you're a wide receiver in the grand scheme of things and your legacy, rings they'll add to it, but they don't mean as much as your stats and performance. Um, I think he's got a great chance to be that first 2,000-yard receiver. We have to see because it seems like towards the end of the year when it starts getting cold, it seems like Cheetah's not running as fast or is not he's not on his top performance. He's like a Ferrari, right? When the weather is great, you can zip around in it, but if it's like ice on the road and things like that, I don't know if you really want to bring the car out. But as we mentioned before in a previous video, we both believe that if he retired today, he's a Hall of Famer. Uh, but he's going to still continue to add to his resume. I think he's going to have a huge year. And like I said, he's probably the guy outside of QB who keeps a defensive coordinator up at night because he can go for 200 yards and a half like it's nothing. I think he's by far the fastest player on a football field and probably the fastest player on a football field in probably what um, the last I'll say 10 to 15 years. I think the only guy who will rival him is the guy who we've compared him to, even though they're two different players. But Randy Moss.
mm-hmm.
Other than that, can you think of a guy who's
Different
been
speeds, though.
different speeds, like different
Randy Moss
speeds?
covers about 8 yards a stride.
Yeah, yeah, and he doesn't look like
Runs
he's
like a
moving as fast as
gazelle.
Tyreek Hill. It's a cheetah versus a gazelle, right? Um, and they go about it different, but defensive coordinators and I remember when his last year on the Chiefs, when defenses started basically putting their two safeties back about 15 yards. And that was like the defense that everybody was running the first half against the Chiefs. And then they kind of
Mm-hmm.
figured out that okay, well we can just have them run in routes because there's a big gap in the middle of the defense. And then once he gets the ball, you have to then catch him. But Nothing else to say.
A-
That's Tyreek Hill.
a-
You know.
Andy Reid is an offensive mastermind, man. He's going
Yes,
to
he
get
is.
his players the ball. He's going to find
Yeah.
ways to make them succeed. Yeah, no, yeah, Tyreek Hill, number
Yeah.
two. Um, it's crazy if you look at his stats in 2 years on Miami. It's crazy. And you mentioned that the last year on Kansas City, that was the first year he had 100 catches. Was
Yeah.
last year on Kansas City, but it was also his lowest yards per reception, other than his rookie
El-
year, by like
11
3 yards a
yards.
catch. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But look, I mean, his 2 years on Miami, he had 119 catches for 17, 10, and 7 touchdowns. Then last year, 119 for 17, 99, and 13 touchdowns. So, and he missed a game. So if he would have played that one extra game, would have had a chance to get to 2,000 yards, because you can't write him off on 200. But
Yeah.
would have had to career high in catches, would have passed the 119, and obviously potentially another touchdown. But yeah, man, I mean, he's been first team All Pro 4 times as a wide receiver, once as a kick returner or as a return specialist, 8 Pro Bowls, 6 of them at wide receiver. So, and they're all consecutive, right? So it's all been the last,
Mm-hmm.
Years. He's had the last 4 years, he's had over 1,200 yards. 5 of the last 6 over 1,200 yards. And that one season he didn't. He only played 12 games in 2019. He had 860. But yeah, man, I mean, he's scary. He's fast. He's crazy, man. Led the league last year in yards, touchdowns, yards per game. 112 yards a game, man. That's a lot.
Yes.
I would have been close to breaking the record, right? Second offensive player of the year. He was 4th the year before. I think Mike McDaniel is a very good offensive schemer as well. He's a very good offensive coach. Same thing. He finds ways to get his playmakers the ball and lets them do their thing, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think him going there was great for Tua. Tua is a good enough quarterback to get them the ball. I don't think he's good enough for them to win a Super Bowl, but they're exciting to watch, especially in warm weather. But yeah, Tyreek Hill. So that leaves number 1, who I think everybody knows who it is at this point.
Yeah, Justin Jefferson, who
Mhm.
if he would have been healthy last year, would already have over 6,000 yards in his career. I mean, even with all the injuries last year, he still had 1,074 yards. And I think just as impressive
And
is
a
he's
backup quarterback
consistent
for most of those games too.
backup
Nick
quarterback. Most
Mullins.
he's averaged with the production, he's averaged 15 yards a catch. To me, that's with all the targets and everything, that's probably the most impressive stat. Is he's not
Mhm.
just catching hitches and slants. He's getting the ball down the field. And his thing is, I mean, I even think JJ McCarthy is out for the year. And although I don't think Sam Darnold is good enough for them to stack up wins, I think he's good enough for Justin Jefferson to go off this year. This will be his 5th year, so in his previous 4 years, he's made 3 Pro Bowls. He's been Offensive Player of the Year. He can run every route in the route tree. He's explosive. And it's funny because we had Chase at 3 and we have Jeff. Well, I'm assuming we both have Jefferson at 1. I know we both have Jefferson at 1, and it's so funny to think they were teammates, man, at LSU. And Burrow
With
was
Joe
throwing the
Burrow.
ball to him.
That's why he
And it's
had like
funny.
70 touchdown passes, man.
And their third receiver was Terrence Marshall, who would have
Who's in
been
the NFL? He's in the NFL.
he would have been a number 1 wide receiver at half the SEC teams,
Mm.
and he was the number 3, and still put up big stats himself. But yeah, I mean, Justin Jefferson. What else can I say?
Yeah, no, Justin Jefferson. First 3 years, 3 Pro Bowls, 2 second team All Pro, first team All Pro, Offensive Player of the Year. In 2020, right? So his rookie year, 88 catches, 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns, and then Jamar Chase comes along the next year, rookie year, and does better. So what does Justin Jefferson do? Okay, I see you. 108, 616, and 10. Comes back the year after that. 128 led the league. 1809 led the league in 8 touchdowns. And that was his career low in yards per reception of 14.1. The other 3 years, all over 15. Last year, you mentioned it, 10 games, 9 starts. One game he only played, I think it was like 12 plays or something like that. So really 9 games, if you want to be honest. 68 catches, 1,074 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He averages 6.5 catches a game. So to give you an idea of the production he had last year, right? In 2022, when he had 1,809 yards, he played all 17 games. He had 106.4 yards per game. Last year, in 10 games, he had 107.4. And I mentioned one of the games he barely even played. So he was actually, and if you remember the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season, he had like over 150 yards twice. And the other game, he had like 120. I mean, he was looking like, dude, this guy's going for 2,000.
Yeah.
And he really was probably going to do it if he didn't get hurt. And then Kirk Cousins obviously didn't get hurt too.
Yeah.
He has 30 touchdowns in 60 games. So he's a touchdown every other game. You mentioned he's a yard away from 5,900. He's 8 catches away from 400 catches. So assuming health, he's going to get 108 catches, which is going to put him over 500 catches for his career. He's going to get over 1,100 yards, which is going to put him over 6,000 yards. And then touchdowns, we'll see. Probably won't hit any milestones there. But the only question is the quarterback, right? And now we know it's Sam Darnold. And so we got to see. But his 4 full games after the injury, this was his stats. He had 7 for 84, 6 for 141 and a touchdown, 5 for 59, and finished with 12 for 192 and a touchdown. That's with Nick Mullins. Okay? That's with Nick Mullins as your quarterback.
Yeah.
The first 3 games last year, 9 for 150, 11 for 159, 7 for 149. He only had 1 touchdown, but, 150 yards, 27 catches for 458 yards in 3 games. And then for good measure, the game 4, he had 6 for 85 and 2 touchdowns, and then he got hurt.
Yeah.
Just absolutely bonkers. Best receiver in football. I was honestly kind of half expecting you to have Marvin Harrison on this list because you've talked so much about him. I'm glad you didn't. I don't have any rookies on any of my lists because they have to prove it in the NFL to me. I'm not going to anoint them as a top 10 at something when they haven't played a snap at this league. I do think Marvin Harrison will be on this list next year.
Oh yeah,
and it's very possible, depending on the production he's able to put up on that team, that he's top 5. I think by year 3, I do think he's that talented. He could be. Look, but if Justin Jefferson keeps putting up years like this, it's going to be hard to put anybody ahead of him. If he keeps producing at this level, it'd be hard. You could say, hey, yeah, for the next 5 years, I'd rather have Marvin Harrison because he's younger. But, dude, he keeps putting up 15, 16, 1,800-yard seasons every year for the next 3-4 years. I don't know how you put anybody ahead of him. So,
yeah, I'll tell you, I did not even consider putting Marvin Harrison Jr. in top 10 this year.
Good.
But I've been saying this since he's been at Ohio State. I've been saying I think by year 3 or 4 of his NFL career, he'll be the number 1 wide receiver in the league. And then totally off topic because we're not talking about the sport. But I'm telling you right now, Victor Wembanyama will be first team All NBA next year.
Yeah, I think so too. Because they're gonna ramp up his minutes. If you look at his per minute stats, they were through the roof. I think they're gonna ramp up his minutes. But well, look, the only reason I thought you may have had Marvin Harrison is because in the last episode you mentioned you thought we're thinking about Caleb Williams in the top 10, had him at 12. And I was like, bro, he hasn't played snap. He has not played snap. You got to see what he's got to do. Look,
I get it. He's true.
Talent wise, he might be there, but you gotta mix in the production too. And I gotta see it translate in the NFL before I can.
I get it. That's why I didn't do it because that's why I didn't do it.
Earn the respect.
Yeah, I get it. I'm a man. I like to be ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. Well, that does it for this episode 20. Thank you all for joining in. This was the top 10 wide receivers for 2024. We hope you enjoyed it. We had like the same, I think, final five was, or four was all the same.
That's four.
And our
Yeah.
top seven, I think, was all the same players,
Hmm.
just a couple of them in different orders. So um, let us know what you think. See, who would you put on the top 10 list that we didn't
Hmm.
put? Do you agree Justin Jefferson's number one? There's a lot of um, there's a lot of cases to be made for Tyreek Hill to be number one, especially after the last couple of years he's had. Let us know if
Hmm.
you think that. But once again, thank you for your support. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.